oh buddy, 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 oh buddy. Oh. Mm. Oh. I don't know. I'm enjoying this meat way too much. Meat. Salsa slathered meat. Ow. I wish I could. Sure, I'll stack it. Oh. I drew it, dude. Can't blame me. You're gonna blame the cards. Oh. Because of the game of Uno, you don't trust dogs. He's not talking about you, boy. You're a good boy. All right. So, you want to use Biblio Project or you want to read? right. Ezra chapter 3, verse 6 to 13. Jesus, we come here today. We thank you. Gosh, we thank you for our limitless blessings. Like delicious bagels with salami and cheese and smoked pork butt with delicious salsa. Yeah, it's a pork butt. So it's literally it's the butt side. If you chop up a pig, it's the butt side.
I'm not.
I knew you'd be instantly like, Meat is meat, Char, no matter where it comes from. All right. I thank you, King Jesus, also for delicious salsa that I could put with my meat. You're good. You're wonderful. May we sit here and just recognize that there's a whole world that doesn't have food. Whole world out there doesn't have delicious visual arts, doesn't have access to the scriptures that attest to how you are always giving and denying self for the other. It takes your nose takes so long to get angry. So it takes so long to get hot. Thank you for your steadfast patience. If it wasn't for your patience, I wouldn't be here. Thank you. So as we read the writings of the ancients, please reveal to us what the hell does it mean? What it means then, what it means now. So, this stuff to us Westerners is so foreign. And we just thank you, though, that you have brought it to us. You brought your people, their suffering, being in exile, their hopes and joys for you, the Mashiach. And we are thankful that the Mashiach has come here and died and resurrected so that death does not hold us like death could not hold you. We thank you. Amen. Oh, me back? All right. Meat. From the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to Yahweh. Though Yahweh's palace had not been started, they gave money to the quarrymen and craftsmen, and food, drink, and oil to the Sidonians and Tyrians, to bring cedar wood from Lebanon by sea to Joppa, in accordance with the authorization to them by Cyrus, the king of Persia. In the second year of their coming to the house of God in Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, son of Jozadak, and the rest of their family, the priests, the Levites, and all the people who had come from the captivity to Jerusalem, began and put in place Levites from the age of 20 years and upwards to oversee the work on Yahweh's house. So Jeshua, his sons, and his brothers, and Kadmiel and his sons, descendants of Judah, accepted appointment together to oversee the people doing the work on God's house, with the sons of Henadad, their sons and their brothers, the Levites. When the builders started Yahweh's palace, the priests in their vestments, with trumpets, and the Levites, the descendants of Asaph, with cymbals, were put in place to praise Yahweh in accordance with the directions of David, king of Israel. They sang responsively in praise and thanksgiving to Yahweh, because he is good, because his commitment stands forever for Israel. And all the people raised a great shout in praise of Yahweh, because Yahweh's house has been started. Many of the priests and Levites and ancestral heads, the old men who had seen the first temple, were weeping with the loud voice at the start on this house, while many were raising their voice in the shout and celebration. The people could not distinguish the sound of the celebratory shout from the sound of the people weeping, because the great people were raising a great shout. The sound was audible from afar. So they started the temple, repairing it. The temple got repaired, but it's like only it's like a week. It will be like people spent their whole life playing Minecraft, and then when they came back, they were respecting Minecraft, but they got Roblox Islands. So the people who had never played Minecraft were like, "Whoa, this is fun," but the people who have played Minecraft are like, start crying, ah! Like that. Yep. Maybe I should talk a little lower because there's a little dude sleeping. And so, yeah, through all so there's praise, but yet there's wailing, wailing and praise. To my own great joy, a friend of mine recently got engaged after being on his own for 19 years. He is overwhelmed by happiness. I have never seen him so joyful. Yet, a weird thing about is it that when he talks about it, it also makes him cry. Though he has a hard time explaining why that is so. Hey, love. Did we actually wake him up? Okay. There's a moment that we were like, okay. To my own great joy, a friend of mine recently got engaged after being on his own for 19 years. He is overwhelmed by happiness. I have never seen him so joyful. Yet a weird thing about it is that when he talks about it, it also makes him cry. Though he has a hard time explaining why that is so. It has something to do with being able to believe that this great thing has happened. Perhaps he's afraid it can't really be true. He half expects to wake up one morning and find it's a dream, or to find that his fiancée had decided it's all a mistake. I suspect another factor is that he has never really faced the pain associated with his aloneness. In a strange way, the prospect of his loneliness ending has made it possible to own how tough it was. Beginning work on the temple generated a similar mixed reaction of celebration and weeping in the Judahite community. The weepers were people who had seen the first temple in its glory, which means they must have been in their 60s or 70s. We are not told why they were weeping while others were celebrating. Maybe they wept because they alone could recall the awfulness of the temple's destruction and wondered whether it might happen again. Why they might have been depressed because they couldn't imagine the temple was going to be as glorious as it had once been. There are no other hints that the community was anything other than thrilled with his restored temple. Maybe they were appalled at the magnitude of the task they had set themselves. My hunch is that their tears were a paradoxical expression of their happiness that the work had begun, an expression of joyful disbelief that the moment had come. Both the shouts and the weeping thus had the same significance. The basis of the community's praise. The basis of the community's praise is that Yahweh is good and that his commitment lasts forever. People might have wondered whether Yahweh had abandoned any commitment to them. They knew they could not really complain if this was so. They had forfeited any right to expect Yahweh to stay committed to them. But Yahweh is caught by the word commitment. I think that's, we're learning that word commitment? It's like steadfast commitment? What was the word? It was, hevel? No, not hevel. I forgot. Darn it. Hesed. Yes. Chesed. Such a good word. But Yahweh is caught by the word chesed. The Hebrew word denotes a kind of faithfulness that continues even when the other party does not deserve that it should do so. Despite the people's faithfulness that had led to the exile, Yahweh's commitment could still be their hope. The fact that after half a century they are now able to begin restoring the temple is a sign. Yeah, way later though.
Yeah.
That their hope was not misplaced. Paradoxically, their praise relates to something they themselves were doing. It is because they are initiating work on the temple that they are praising God's goodness and commitment. They know they will not have been able to do it were it not for God's faithfulness. In this context, praise and thankfulness are both appropriate. Praise strictly suggests recognition of the great permanent truths about God, such as God's goodness and commitment. Thanksgiving relates to some new thing that God has done in the lives of the individual or a commitment, and this community certainly has something to give thanks for and testify to. The word temple suggests a specifically religious building. The Old Testament has words with that connection, such as a word that means sanctuary, but this is not the term it regularly uses to refer to the temple. Instead, it uses more everyday words that denote a house or a palace, both of which feature in these verses. The temple is Yahweh's house or Yahweh's palace. The first word house links the term with the dwelling that ordinary people live in. The second palace reminds readers that this is a dwelling fit for a king. The temple is not a shrine or a place that commiserates something in the past or commiserate a person who is dead and gone. It is a place where someone lives. Of course, the Israelites know that God does not really live in the temple. The Psalms makes clear their awareness that God really lives in the heavens and that God's real palace is located there. They also, of course, know that this statement is itself a metaphorical one. 1 Kings 8 gives Solomon's prayer at the original dedication of the temple, and it makes clear the awareness that God can no more be contained within the universe than within a earthly building. The heavens within the cosmos stand for another realm in which God lives in, a realm that existed even before the cosmos existed. But the earthly temple constitutes I'm having a hard time with that word. Constitutes. Did I spell wrong? Where are you? There you are. Where did I lost you? There you are. Constitutes. Constitute. CONSTITUTES. Oh yeah, I muted it.
Constitute.
Constitute. I like the Constitution.
So easy.
Constitute. Constitute. Of course, it's constitutes. La, la, la. I like the Constitution. It's fine. My brain gets shackled sometimes when I see words that I know, but then I see the word and my brain goes, ah!
Duh.
But the earthly temple constitutes an earthly equivalent or embodiment or avatar of God's palace in the heavens. It meant that there is a palace, a place on earth where you know you can be in God's presence in a special sense. The Israelites also know that there is yet another sense in which God is present everywhere, so that you can pray everywhere and know God's protection everywhere, anywhere. Whether or not you could feel God was in the temple, you know that God was indeed there because God had promised to be present there. Such promises had been expressed to David and Solomon. You could bring your offerings and know they were not accepted. Bring your prayers and know they were heard. Oh, I said not. You could bring your offerings and know they were accepted. Bring your prayers and know they were heard. Although the story speaks of the starting of work on the temple, we have noted that this did not mean starting building from scratch. Regular worship had been being offered in the shell of Solomon's temple for months. The main material need for the restoration work was timber, which would be needed to replace the roof and paneling of the building that had been burned in 587, though setting the temple on fire could have led to the shattering or melting of some of its stone, as had been the case in Solomon's day. The timber comes from Lebanon by the arduous process of floating logs down the Mediterranean and carry them up to Jerusalem. The imperial record of which chapter 6 will speak applies that a subvention from Cyrus to cover the cost of this expensive project backed up his mere permission to undertake the work. The chapter has already known that the arrangements for worship followed the teaching of Moses, and now adds that they also followed the directions of David. There are two reasons for this second emphasis, like the reference in Moses' teaching. It establishes the continuity of the worship of the second temple with that of the first temple. The people know that God is involved with Israel for the long haul. Its entire story is part of God's story, in making sure they operate in light of David's direction as well as those in Moses' teaching. They are playing their part and making sure they are part of that story. The other reason is that some of the people around them also claim to be part of this story, but it's not clear whether they really are. Specifically, the people in the province of Samaria are or claim to be the descendants of the old kingdom of Ephraim. But the old kingdom of Ephraim had turned its back on David. If they return to David, they can be part of the story. If they do not do so, they are on their own. Judah needs to make sure it meets the criterion of faithfulness to David's directions, as well as criterion of faithfulness to Moses' teaching. All right, friend. We read the good explanation of the temple, their excitement, and also following the teachings of Moses, and also the following of David. We can start. Oh yeah, of course. Thank you for. All right. Do you want to do Bio Project or another section? Okay. Thanks for catching me. Oh,
No, we need good.
well, thanks for being honest with me, my friend. I legitimately forgot that we gotta do another section. I'm so used to only doing one section because these other half days. I'm very proud of you. Thanks, man.
But like,
Meat.
The Gospel of Luke opened with the birth of Jesus.
Then Luke showed us how Jesus was Israel's Messiah, announcing the good news of God's kingdom to the poor, and how he was God's true prophet to Israel.
In this next section, Jesus sets out with his disciples on a long road trip to Jerusalem, where they'll join thousands of Israelites to celebrate the ancient feast of Passover.
Now, Luke wants this road trip from the mountain to Jerusalem to remind you of ancient Israel's long road trip. With Moses, they went from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land. And then later, King David established Jerusalem as their capital. And so here, Luke is portraying Jesus as a new Moses who's renewing Israel's covenant with God, and as a new David. He's gathering the people together to live under his rule.
As Jesus leaves, he sends out a wave of his followers ahead of him to prepare each new place for his visit.
Then Jesus would arrive, announcing the good news of God's kingdom, and he would call people to follow him and join this new thing God was doing in Israel.
There are many of his teachings and parables in this section, specifically about how following Jesus will force you to totally rethink your money, how you resolve conflict, and how you treat the poor.
In every town, Jesus would create communities of people who were learning to live in a totally new way, so that greed would be transformed into generosity and anger into forgiveness. And in these Jesus communities, all outsiders are welcome.
Yeah, good news for the poor. That's one of Luke's main themes.
Yeah, you'll find it all over this section. The marginalized people that he heals, the shamed sex workers he reaches out to, the tax collectors he includes. This is Jesus' kingdom crew.
And Israel's religious leaders watch and start to criticize him. If he really is God's prophet, why is he welcoming sinners and eating with them?
Yeah, this section reads like the Battle of the Banquets. So Jesus throws these dinner parties as a symbol of how God's kingdom is here for the sick and the poor, people who could never pay him back.
Jesus also attends banquets with Israel's religious leaders.
Yeah, and he lays into them for becoming an arrogant, exclusive social club.
But they don't get it, and so he tells them a famous parable that goes